Hi guys, Chris here with Chuwi's second laptop. So this is the Lapbook 14.1. Now why is it called 14.1? Well, that is the size of the screen, as you can imagine. It has a 1080p screen on there. Now, like the other model that I looked at, the 15.6 inch model, it's got a white design on it. And instead of that Atom Cherry Trail X5 Z8300 processor, we now have something that has a little more power, and that is the newer Apollo Lake M.2 50. That's a Celeron branded chip. Has 4 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of internal storage. Let's have a look at it now. I'll get the box open and we'll just see exactly what you get if you were to order this. So it's double boxed here. This I got from gearbest.com, and yes, I had to pay taxes like I always do. So it's got factory seals on there, one on the bottom, and then another on the top that has been broken, probably by GearBest. Okay, so this is the accessories first, obviously. So it comes with a small charger, EU plug, but of course that is very easy to change. It's just that infinity or figure 8 plug that is very standard. And this is rated to 12 volts, 2 amps. And then there's a warranty card thing here and a quick start guide, product inspection report even. Something I haven't seen before. So someone has signed this, that it has been inspected. So that's good. Hopefully that means it's going to be trouble-free, hardware-free, no problems, nothing wrong with it. Okay, so in the super white color again, I just had to actually adjust the ISO setting of my camera because it is very white. So for ports on the left-hand side, we have a status LED, power in, USB 3 port, and a mini HDMI. And on the right, the USB 2 port, 3.5mm headphone jack, and a micro SD card reader. So the micro SD cards sit in flush. They don't stick out, so you shouldn't lose them once they are pushed right in. The bottom, 2 downwards firing speakers, 4 rubber feet, and there's actually a little bit of plastic that sticks out here, possibly to give more support there to the keyboard when you press down on it. So the weight comes in at 1.46 kilos, and the thickness around 19 millimeters there in the middle of the notebook. So let's see if I can open it up with just one hand. No, that's not going to happen there. Alright, just a press material thing in there. You can see again, IPS is mentioned, so it definitely should have an IPS panel. And along there, Intel Celeron badge. White touchpad, just like the Chuwi 15.6 Lapbook version. And that does have left and right hardware buttons in there, but they aren't, of course, separate individual buttons. They're incorporated in the touchpad. And that has a textured feel to it, that plastic. The plastics on here do feel reasonably good. Like an ABS style plastic, the build quality is reasonably good. So the keys, first off, I can notice that they are raised up quite a bit. So that has a reasonable amount of travel. Now I'm pushing down hard there. That seems quite rigid. A lot better than the first Jumper EasyBook 2 I got that had this super trampoline bouncy keyboard. Not as bad here. So the power button's there. And it seems to have the same level as resistance as the rest of the buttons there, which is a little disappointing. And I've just noticed that the brightness control shortcut is missing as well, which was missing on the 15.6 inch model. So it's a real shame they haven't put that on here. Normally you can hold function, brightness up and down, or it's one of these keys along here. So that's not there at all. Just going to see if this is going to power on. Blue status LEDs just come on. There's another status LED for caps lock, number lock, and this here is microphones, dual microphones there on the keyboard, which I don't believe is the best position for them, because then you pick up the noise of the keyboard when you're typing. So Windows powered up really quick. Just wanted to point out a couple of things about the screen though. So this bezel around the outside is now equal width, both left and right, not like the Chuwi Lapbook 15.6, which had the right bezel larger than the left, which was something, as a user in the comments mentioned, once you've seen it, you can't unsee, and that was very true there. So this is all matte, which is good. Matte covered screen, IPS, anti-glare, and it actually looks really quite nice. Not bad at all. So up the top, there is a 2 megapixel camera. And I'm just going to quickly go in and have a look at free available space. So we've got 43.9 gigabytes free. And in system here, see Windows 10 Home. I need to connect to the internet to activate, which I will do later on. Full 4 gigabytes. No, they have allocated some of that to the GPU. So we've got 3.84 gigabytes usable. Quickly look in the device manager. And what I'm really keen to know is, have they used dual channel RAM? And is it running at 1600 megahertz, the full speed? Hopefully it's not crippled to 1066 like on the Lapbook 15.5 inch. So we have slots used, 2 of 3. That's unusual, 3 slots. And that's 1600 megahertz. Now, I think that is soldered onto the motherboard. I highly doubt they'll be using SODIMMs, so you can actually replace them like notebook memory. Oh, but I'd have to open it up to actually confirm that or find pictures of the internals. So the disk drive is, again, a SanDisk. Starting to see SanDisks all the time now. It used to always be Toshiba's or Samsung's. So that's a DF40064. And then under the network adapters, dual band wireless AC. This is very good, and I'm really happy with that choice because I have used this chipset on the Cube i7 book, the Mix Plus, and now the Voyo VBook version 3, and it works really, really well. Good speeds, good range, a nice chipset that you can really push a lot of speed through. So that is all good. And well, I'll just click on here, the processor. So we got 4 cores, 4 threads, M.2 Just to give you a close-up here of the keys on the keyboard, you can see what I mean about them being raised up again. So they have a lot of travel to them. Looking at that, I'd say that's about 2 or 1.8 millimeters of travel. I'll measure that. And you can see again that if I press really hard, yeah, there's a little bit of flex there, but overall that is nothing serious and looks good. Feedback and feel of the keys as well does not feel bad at all. Now the touchpad feels good. Accuracy, I can go from one side of the screen to the other in one gesture, one motion there. Now it does support double tap, right click, double tap to drag things. So it's supporting gestures. And overall, I actually do like this. This is a usable touchpad and perhaps one of the better ones I have used on these cheaper products. Normally the touchpads that I test out on those type cover or transformer style keyboard docks on the tablets are hopeless, too small, horrible. This doesn't feel bad. Screen brightness is set to 0% at the moment. This is 25%, 50, 75, and then 100. And it's looking like a very nice screen. So just a quick look at the viewing angles. It does look like IPS to me, the way that is handling that. And then the vertical. There isn't that shift like there was with the 15.6 inch model, which I believe was a TN panel or a different kind of technology. This does look like it is definitely IPS, this one. Time to check out the 2 downward firing speakers. Now, speakers are normally one of the worst parts on these cheaper branded tablets and laptops. So let's have a listen to them. Okay, they lack bass, like they literally almost all do, but the volume on it is actually quite good. Not too bad, I'd say, for this price range of around a 230 US. I think it's adequate, sufficient. So I'm just going to run one benchmark here in this first impressions video, and this is Geekbench 4. Now that score is almost 1400 single core score, and the faster clocked Pentium N4200 Apollo Lake gets a score of around 1500. So that isn't actually too bad considering this is clocked to 2.2 gigahertz. That other chipset, the N4200, is running 2.5 gigahertz. Now the multi-core score, the faster chip of the Apollo Lakes gets around 4200. This here is about 400 points shorter than, so about 100 points less each core. So not too bad there. I'll have to check out gaming performance. That'll come later in about a week's time in the full review, as well as thermals to see if it's going to have any thermal throttling, which of course I'm a little worried about because this does have a plastic housing, no metal on the bottom of it, so nothing really to dissipate heat. So time to test out the 2 USB ports it has on here. Now this is a simple test. I have a 1TB hard drive here. Will it power it and run it just fine? Because a lot have failed at this very simple test. So start out with the USB 2 port on the right hand side. Okay, so white light means USB 2 speeds. And yes, that, where's my mouse cursor? That is going to work just fine. And lastly, the USB 3 port. So blue light. And that is also detected and working, so that's great. So curiosity has got the better of me. I'm going to open the back cover off and see if it really does have a SODIMM RAM slot in there or not. So what we need to do is just remove all of these screws here. So here's the internals. There's the 2 speakers left and right there. There's metal backing, quite a thick metal plate here that actually goes behind on the keyboard. So that's actually really good to see they've put that in there. So far I can't see any problems with this build. There is our battery and obviously no RAM slots here. I didn't think there would be replaceable RAM. Otherwise, they would have given you a little panel to get in there quite easy. Now, there is this interesting little port here. Now, I thought this might be a slot there for a SATA 3 hard drive, but it isn't actually because it's too small. You can see the dimensions of that, so I'm not really too sure what that is. Now, we have a large heat spreader, this area here, that's covering the chipset, obviously, the RAM, and the eMMC. Now, what I think this might actually be, just thinking now that this is an M.2 SATA 3 slot for the 22 by 42 or even larger, actually, one that'll fit in there. So there's the chipset. Here we have the eMMC and the 2 RAM chips. There's actually space for 2 lots of 2 gigabytes more, so they could actually have an 8 gigabyte version of this if they wanted to. Now, overall, the build quality to me and the way this is laid out looks good. They have used glue on all of the plugs to make sure that when this is moving around and it's in transit in your bag or whatever, those plugs aren't going to come loose. The battery is screwed in place, everything's screwed in place into the housing. And lastly, that Intel wireless AC 3165 chipset there, soldered onto the motherboard. It has 2 antennas, one's at the base next to the trackpad, and it looks like the other one's in the lid of the laptop. So I got home and tested out this slot. It is indeed a slot in type SATA 3 M2. So I put my Transcend 256 gigabyte drive in there, and I benchmarked it. As you can see, it runs at full SATA 3 speeds, and the BIOS detects it just fine. So this can be set as the boot drive instead of the slower 64 gigabyte eMMC. If you wanted to mod and upgrade this, then you can do it. The inside of the rear plate has metal on here and some shielding to help stop that heat from being transferred. Now, if you're a bit of a modder, you could put a thermal pad between the heatsink that's on top of the chipset to transfer heat onto that to maybe lower the thermals. Okay guys, so that's the unboxing, and my first impressions overall are very good for the Lapbook 14.1 inch here. I really like the screen on it. I find it to be very practical because it's got that matte anti-glare coating on there. It's 1080p. It looks great, good brightness, deep blacks as well for this type of panel, good viewing angles. I really can't fault the screen. Now the build of it does have a little bit of flex down near the touchpad, and the keyboard feels solid enough. Good travel on the keys, but I need some more time on there really to form a proper opinion of that keyboard. But so far so good. I can type on there without any errors. Now the speakers, they sounded loud, and the internal storage is a SanDisk. I'll have to benchmark that and find out those speeds. RAM's running at dual channel 1600 megahertz, which is also a positive, good to see. And also good to see that both of those USB ports can power external hard drives. Now, other things like battery life, gaming, thermals, that's all going to be tested in the full review. I kind of find it hard at this point to fault the tablet, apart from, you could say, maybe a plasticky build. But it's a solid, well-made plastic, well-finished, like an ABS plastic. And if I did have one complaint, it'd be that there's no function shortcut on the keyboard for the screen brightness. And that is basically it so far. But I will cover everything else in the full review. Thank you so much for watching this. If you haven't already, why not subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I hope to catch you back in the full review soon.